Why I 100% support sexless marriages. I actually left in 2004 and I prayed for a wife because I'm going to try again. And then about 2007, I got a religious book. I bought some big bunches of religious books on the internet, and I got this religious book about um, marriage, and from a doctor in America. And I read the whole entire book, and I was really fascinated. I thought it was a great book. But he came up with he mentioned sexless marriages, and I thought, well, what are those? And he just spoke about people being damaged from life, from being damaged, been abused, sexually abused, or emotionally abused, and all that sort of stuff. And then about 2008, I got this. I gave up. I said to God, I said, look, it's been 4 years, nothing's happened, no woman, and so I just wanted to like give that up. And all these years later, 2022, I have a strong support for sexless marriages because we live in a toxic society, which is very dysfunctional, and we have a lot, millions of, if not billions, of sexually, what would you say, sexually burnt people, people who've been harmed by sex. When my ex-wife left, she drank a lot. I didn't, and I'd like to have two little stubby bottles of beer in a month or 2 months. When she left, I was so sick of it. I just gave up alcohol on the spot. I just said, right, I'm not drinking alcohol again. Um, so I just gave it up. And I think people feel like that you get into a really bad relationship. Like quite a few people have said to me, "Why aren't you in a relationship?" And I explained to them somewhat briefly about my ex, how much it hurt me, how much it hurt the children, how my I came out of it with depression and severe anxiety, a lot of bad thinking, not evil or anything, but um, bad thinking about myself and negative thinking about myself, and I wasn't happy, and I can understand how a person can leave a relationship and say, that's enough, I'm not doing that again. And then they meet someone special and they think, well, I really like this person, or maybe I really love this person, I'd like to give it a go. In the book, the doctor mentioned that some people had just agreed, they'd gone out on a few dates, and then they one had just turned around and say, look, I'm not interested in sex. And the other one will say, well, I feel the same way. Or they would be one of the ones who's madly in love and say, well, I'll wait. And they're happy to just stay with them and wait. There was a story about a woman and a man, true story. They're heavily into extreme sports. Then one day he had an accident and was paralyzed from the waist down. She dumped him immediately, and he said, well, why? I thought we loved each other. They're married. And she said, yeah, but you're not the same anymore. And our sex life would be far different than if it was before. And he discovered a harder side of sex. For me, I sat down one day, probably, I can't remember when, I wouldn't have a clue. And I thought about the biological side of the sex organs in a very straightforward way and with a lot of reality. When we get into sex and stuff and people do oral sex and stuff, there's no thinking. There's no thinking about what you're actually doing, what you're tasting and stuff like that. And it's um, when I did this study, which went over a few months, I was reading various bits and pieces, and not on sex itself, on the human body and I was reading about relationships at the time, and then you'd read about bad things like like rape and abuse and stuff. And in the dysfunctional, toxic society, people, because they grow up immature, yet they desire sex, they reach out and get the desire for sex in immature, dysfunctional ways. And so you read about that sort of stuff and you start thinking, I really don't like sex. Then I thought of the billions of abortions every year, which I'm very much against abortion. Then I thought of all the rapes and people killing each other for sex. I got this thing where I walk around and I read something in a book and I just think and I think, it's only sex. What's the matter with them? And I realize that if people can, like, people do road rage and it's dent in the offender and they try to kill the other person. So I suppose you can sort of see sex that way. Rapes has often been comes down to not sex, but a male being dominated by a female or hurt by a female or some such issues they have, mental issues they have. And then they find a female weaker than them and they take it out on that female. And the obvious way to them is, other than punching them, is raping them because they know it'll hurt them. And they've been hurt by a female, so that's their twisted logic. So there's a lot about sex that causes a huge amount of harm in this world. And so a lot of people get into relationships and they think to themselves, I really like you. I think you're a wonderful person. It's so nice to be with you, and then they bond together on that. After I read in the book about sexless marriages, I went on the internet and I did some research on it, and I was pleasantly surprised at how happy many people were in sexless marriages, and taking sex out of the marriage. There was no sex can be used for bribery, and you crave for it, and it makes you feel less of yourself if the other person won't have sex with you and you have to crawl to get it. And remember, it's supposed to be a natural desire, so if the other one won't let you have it because they're holding back for some reason, they're attacking your natural desire and stuff like that. So in one case, I was living with a female, and she one day locked herself out in the shed at the back. And when I came home from work, and I was like, "What are you?" I knocked on the shed door because I couldn't find her in the house, and I said, "What are you doing?" She said, "I'm sleeping on the floor." And she got some blankets and pillows, and I said, "What the heck?" And I said, "What's the matter with you?" And she says, "I want to do something. I can't remember what it was. So I want to go away somewhere or do something." And I didn't agree with that. And maybe it was to buy something. And I said, "Oh, okay." And I said, "So what are you in this for?" And she said, "You're not getting sex until I get it." And I said, "Oh, well, you pack your bags and leave. Well, you stay in the shed all the time." No, I said, "But we have an issue on something. You're not supposed to bribe me or taunt me over something like sex. If you're not going to give me sex, then that's fine. Go, leave." And she never ever did it again. She stayed, but she never did that again. She ended up mucking around. But sex was a very strong thing for her, and then, so in this society, today, we have a lot of immatureness where sex is concerned, a lot of toxicity, a lot of violence, a lot of cruelty, a lot of evil. Like there's satanistic sex groups. There's people who, if people have sex with children, and mothers having sex with their own daughters, and fathers having sex with their own children, it's sick. You're thinking there's a really big mental dysfunction going on out there in the wider world. And a lot of people get into relationships having been burned from that. And they fall in love with someone, they realize they really want to be around this person a lot. They want to spend a lot of time with this person. And they've still got the haunting from the past in them. So they get into the relationship, they talk to each other, become friends, they like each other, all that stuff. and then one just says, "Look, I'm not ready for sex," or "I don't want to have sex again." One of those things. And the other one agrees, and they get into what is called a sexless marriage. And I read some on the internet, some people claiming to have been like that for like 30, 40 years and been extremely happy. They hug a lot, they talk a lot, they are best friends, they get on a lot, and it's a lot of fun for them, not complicating their romance with sex. A lot of people, like at my age, um, we've had our children, so we're not interested in having it anymore. And so we've had our children, and not that we don't want to, but because if the opportunity came up and I got into a romance with somebody who I really liked and loved, and she wasn't interested in sex, I'd be 100% fine with it. Wouldn't bother me in the slightest. I have no cravings or desires, or I think the deep study of the biological part of sex, the deep study of crime in the world, psychology, the human mind, uh, evil, and all that. And yeah, you see how much sex actually has to do with the dysfunction of the world and people's twisted minds, and it's their go-to thing for pleasure and stuff like that. And you find it far easier to say no. You just think, well, it's all so painful what people have gone through and what people are going through right now, all because of sex. Sex was between it's for a man and a woman in marriage to pleasure each other, and like he gives to her and she gives to him. It's not disgusting. It's not dishonorable. It doesn't disrespect the other. It shouldn't be immoral or indecent, and it just becomes this added extra to their relationship. And they are pleased at how the other one makes them feel. It's sexually, physically, like a hug. If you haven't had a hug in a long time, you hug someone that's like so nice, and it's the same sort of thing. You might not have sex for 3 days, but then you do. I read stories of men not having sex with their wives for like one case once a year, and it wasn't him; it was her. She just didn't want to have what completely lost interest in sex, but he did want to. Now, if she'd have just said, "I want a sexless marriage now," he wouldn't have expected it, and it caused a lot of stress because he was always hoping she'd want to have sex and she wouldn't. So it's kind of communication, understanding, maturity, and if you can sit there and say that person doesn't want to do it, they're happy not doing it. They're happy wanting to create a loving companionship, best friends, and who hang out together all the time and live together, and without the complications and the difficulties of sex added. Then it can really work. And as if you do a search on it or you find a book on it, you'll find that there are a huge amount of relationships where people have just been stung in this world today and they've had enough and they just give up. It's like me with alcohol when my ex left. I just like that. It's it. Never doing that again. And I wasn't an alcoholic. I was only having like one or two small bottles a month, or maybe even 2 months. It was just what her behaviour was when she drank that put me off. And my parents' heavy drinking. Um, Back like 10 years before that, I drank a lot heavier. Things like that. And you just think, nah, I don't want to do this anymore. And that happens with sex too. You just think, nah, I don't want to go there anymore. Or maybe I want to take a 10-year break or a 20-year break, or maybe I just don't want to do it. Or you marry someone who's not ready for sex, and then you live together for a certain period of time, and then one day you both think, well, hey, let's do it. Let's try it again and see if we like it. It's not the end of the world if you don't have sex. When I was a teenager, the impression was you're not a man unless you had a girlfriend and you're having sex. And then you've got the He-Man, Al Bundy types who are incensed with sex and being a macho dude, and the big man, and it's all just rubbish. It's utter rubbish. Reality, you're not missing out on anything when you don't have sex. You're making life a lot less complicated, and in many cases, these people have found out, more loving, more complete, more enjoyable, and maybe sex will come in later, on in the future, maybe it won't. Fine. So anyway, that's why I 100% support sexless marriages. I think it's an excellent idea.